Good morning. Welcome to Mending Threads. This is your safe place and your stronghold for whole body wellness. This is a transformation series, and today we have for you a topic. We want to discuss this from on women, culture, and mental health, and we want to look at it not only from a standard point of view, but also get some male feedback. And I have received information from many women, several, I'll say quite a few women, at least about 25 or 30, that are asking to get ideas from men about women and perceptions of women, especially when we're looking at mental health. And I want you to know that this is a time of a month. March is also looking at mental health in women. And I want you to know that this is a topic of concern. Did you know that there 1 in 5 women tend to have or be diagnosed with mental health illness? And we're talking about when we look at special populations, about 7.5 million women of I would say of African American women or women of color have been diagnosed as with mental health disorders. Now there are a lot of causes, and we're going to talk about that today. But first, we've been talking about stress and trauma and what it can do to our body. And every moment we get, we're following it through. So the topic, there are 2 areas that I want us to keep in mind, is that we all have stress. And when the stress impacts our bodies, depending on how much environmental and other areas of trauma that we are experiencing. And we do know that it then affects how our brain is ordered and how our brain functions. These conditions do affect our brain. And when we look at this, we know that it can affect this whole area of our brain, the prefrontal cortex, because it says that we will then have, when we have intense trauma, it affects our emotions chemically, and also it goes to a particular part of the brain that deals with our emotions, which is the amygdala. And then that determines how we respond, the intensity of how we respond. Environment and training in our experiences tend to impact how we're going to respond. It's like, how much stress do we already have in our environment? For example, when the storm came and we had loss of power and the pipes were breaking, not only prior to that, we had the COVID and still having that experience. And in addition to that, we had the flood, the previous storms prior to that. Now, let's just suppose that you're living in an environment that actually brings to you, because of your color or because you're tall or because you're a woman, more stressors in addition to that and expectations. So what happens is the body is continually trying to respond to address what you say it needs to address. And what does that say? That what we think affects who we are. So if we already believe that we're under a lot of stress, if we already think in a certain way, let's suppose that now we think that we're less than. Let's suppose that now we think we don't have enough of something. We would then have those additional ways of thinking that would impact more the stress that we experience. So our personality and how we bring on those expectations raised to a higher level the anxiety or whatever we're experiencing. Okay, so now I'm going to open up and welcome to our show today, Mr. Ricky Johnson, and I'm so thankful that you're here today. He is going to ask questions, and we're going to pray that we'll be able to answer his questions. And I want him to share his experiences around mental health in women. So whatever his thoughts are. So I wanted to say, when I spoke about 1 in 5 women tend to have mental health issues, and I talked about 7.5 million women of color tend to be diagnosed with mental health. What are some of the things that you were thinking about as I was talking about that and what people experience and how we get trauma and mental health.
Well, first of all, thank you, Dr. Lewis, for having me on the show.
Yeah.
Uh, you know, mental health is something that we as a black culture really don't take serious. We've always thought that, oh, that person is just off, or that's just how they are. And so
Mm-hmm.
you really need to look at mental health and take it very seriously. Now, one of my questions would be, when you're dealing with mental health, is to look at the background of that individual, as far as where they, what is their background, because it all stems from hereditary, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
Things of that nature.
Mm-hmm. Well, hereditary can be a part of it, and also social is a big part of it. Okay,
Hmm.
so we learn when you say hereditary, sometimes people think it's hereditary because there are chemical changes that are going on in the body. They call it prenatal or situations when the mother is going through hormonal changes. If she experiences a lot of trauma during that time, it does affect the activity, the brain activity of the child and of the mother even more. Okay, so in other words, the mother can have more depression or mental health issues during or after, depending on the chemical changes and the nutrition and the care uh, during the time of pregnancy and also aftercare. You see, and many other
Hmm.
issues as to whether the child is breastfed or not, and the mother has enough nutrients when breastfeeding. So you're really right on that. So it's earlier on factors that truly depend how we take on stress, what we think about stress, and what that is. So yes, you're right about that. So one of the things that we talked is that when you ask a person about mental health, it's like how do you know when you have mental health? How do you know it's issues or needs? So sometimes we think of mental health as something special or something bad or something. We have myths and we have things that are real and things that are myths about mental health. Some people say, well, you don't really have a mental health issue. You just need to go in and pray. Those are just demons in your system, you see.
Hmm.
Or uh, um, so people then carry a response that they're fearful of mentioning it because they don't want someone to think. And I've assessed this and I've asked people, how did you not come before? Because they didn't want to feel that they were inadequate, that that is something wrong with them or their family, because it throws a cast a shadow on their family, and they don't want to then look at that. Or they say that you just need to pray a little bit more, so they don't want to feel that they don't have a close relationship with their God. So they don't want to come. So now the mental health issues are getting worse because time has gone on, and it could be because of lack of amino acid. It could be because it's a hormonal difficulty within the body. So all of that is not corrected because of what you just said, because of cultural factors or beliefs about the mind or the body or mental health. You see. So I guess mhm.
Yeah, well, the part two of what I wanted to bring out was, the upbringing, in the, as a female is going to be just a little bit different than the male, because I believe that, as girls, they grow up smarter than boys do, and they catch
Mhm.
on a little. And depending on how they were raised, as far as like foster care, that
Mhm.
can be a determining factor as well. If they're in a situation where they were taken out of the home and placed in foster home, and making those adjustments at a young age, trying to figure out, what's going on, and then the
Mhm.
diet that you're on. I believe food has a lot to do with it as well.
Yes, you're right. And even cultural foods that you were growing up with. So let me just identify some of those factors. You're right on target. Separation Let's go back to women, because the first thought you had is that women were smarter. Well, women are expected. Let's look at family environment. Research has
Mm-hmm.
shown that women, and it depends on what social strata you grew up in. Okay. But generally, overall, and I tell people through the Women's Resource Center that women around the world are expected to be persons who are caregivers. So women are trained to be caregivers, and secondly, trained to think of more than one thing at the same time, and also will have multiple roles within the family. And they're trained in social situations to even pay attention to different factors in the environment. For example, I think President Johnson said, he said, wherever I go, I make sure I touch base with my wife, because my wife is going to have her hand on the pulse of the situation. So there are social situations that men generally are not attending to, that involve the emotional self and the balancing of the emotional self. So the man, but it's something important, because I remember even riding along, and I'll get back to that. I was looking um, at a house, looking out the windows. We were driving, and what was astounding to me is that I was paying attention to the aesthetic situation of this building. My husband paid attention to, he picked out some structural things that I had not even paid attention to. So I think men are reared to pay attention to basic foundation issues, things related to what their world is going to be about. It's the same as women. And we're trained around emotional, in generally speaking. Now, I'm not saying all the time. And I'm trying to also say traditionally, because there's a change in generation around people, the millennials. There's a transition. That's a transition period of change. And we're going to see a little something different effect from with that generation. But you're correct. Our early experiences tend to impact how we think, what we think is going to be important, how we take care of our bodies and our health, what roles we're going to prioritize in the family. Many times, research shows even the careers that we choose, and women tend to choose careers that are related to caregiving, if you pay attention. Even
Mm-hmm.
psychologists, even nursing. I mean, you see what I'm saying. Teachers. Um, so when you look at that, you look at how we socialize each other. Okay, around that, and then secondly, you mentioned us about trauma. You said particularly people who are in foster care. So they really showed that about 20% of people that go through trauma are separated and dealing with issues of loss. Women that are ill, they're looking at issues of loss. Um, Moving into foster care, you're losing and separating from your family. You're having to adjust to a strange situation, something that you're not familiar with. And the more times that you do that, the more trauma that you are accounting, and people are not preparing you along the way for this kind of change. Okay. And so then that can wreak how you view a situation, the trust that you have in an environment, how fearful, the level of anxiety, how much depression a person has to overcome, and whether or not they engage in what kind of coping behaviors. You see, as to what they're experiencing. They show that 60% of people tend to, particularly women, tend to engage in obsessive compliance behaviors and phobias as a result of anxiety. Like, for example, when you look at women, more than that, because 22% of women in every 1,000, but men tend to be 13% in 1,000. And that is because research shows that men tend to not rely on their emotions as much as women. But it's not that they are not affected, they're just affected differently. And the second thing is that women are more inclined to be diagnosed as opposed to men. If a male go to the doctor's most likely not going to diagnose the person with the mental health issue. He's going to come up with another physical issue as opposed. And this is not my saying. This is what research shows is that women will speak more about their emotional issues as well. So I think you're right in target. All of those situations that we need to look at in terms of preparing people. So training for the workers and also people preparing to engage in a changing of circumstances. And something that people have not talked about and that I'm beginning to work more with are veterans and persons who come from incarceration. People have
Mm-hmm.
no idea, and they're not giving, um, I guess, credence, if you want to say, to those situations as to what people come out. I call it post traumatic syndrome. Some people call it in a post traumatic stress syndrome and post traumatic slave syndrome together, because I believe the incarceration system, and when you look at the veterans, um, they go through something similar. Okay, and it says that it affects the brain, the way the brain operates, and the intensity of how the person is experiencing the circumstances. So when they come out, you got another adjustment process. Going in, you have an adjustment, and you got trauma every day. Those circumstances that people are not talking about, and then when the person come home either from the service or they come home from prison or whatever, there's no one or very few people there to help them, like the adoption, to get adjusted to the system. They're just they're say they're going through treatment, but they want to just give them medication.
Mm-hmm.
And so the socialization, particularly for women dealing with the emotional situation, is not really talking through without making them feel bad about it, because a lot of it comes from the environmental circumstances that brought them to those situations in the first place. And so, how are you going to the word perceive, rethink, and use all of your skills in this new situation for health? You see, and so people are not really talking about it. They're not really helping the person through. So there are like some symptoms that I ask people when they come in. I say, well, they said, well, Dr. Lewis, this is just normal, isn't it? I said, yes, it's normal for people who have gone through trauma to have these experiences, but it is not normal for the way that we were prepared to interact. The body was prepared to interact in the environment. Okay, so now we got a person trying to function in this environment with abnormal changes in their body. Okay, and if they start taking medication without careful consideration with a whole body wellness physician, some psychiatrists look at the whole system. Some physician looks at the mind, body, and spirit. Others look at the chemical function. If they only look at the chemical function for women or anyone who's gone through the experience, they will begin to administer medication that generally helps the body chemically respond to the recognition that maybe the neurotransmitters have something in absence. So it fulfills and sends a signal for it, which generally takes some part of the body off balance.
Okay.
So to bring the body back, we need to what? Work with a whole body wellness physician that looks at
Right.
all of these stress disorders and bring the body into harmony with itself in terms of food is medicine. In
Okay.
terms of, you understand? And so I know I'm
Yeah.
talking I know somebody is like, oh no, she's trying to be. No, I'm not. I'm not trying to take anybody away from any doctor or any, because we need them. Actually, we need them on the show to begin to help us look at how to bring the body back to normal harmony and balance after all of these things. Because the brain, like we talked last week, the
Hmm.
brain, the way you think, is cutting a path. Like if you were walking across someone's grass and you walked across that grass every day, what will happen is there will be a path that visibly seen across that grass over time. And that is the way habits and way we think. So if we really wanted this to happen, we would have to travel a new path and various paths in order to not create a path. And if we wanted to create a path in a certain direction, we would walk another path repeatedly. So we could create a path. So some paths, if we could visually see this, we want to close, and some we want to open. And then we'll have to develop new habits to walk across those paths.
I
So
agree.
that's, yes.
So would you say that what we're talking about would we add in there multiple personalities because of the direction that the person is trying to take the path? They take on multiple personalities.
Well, yes. Now you can say it like that, or attitudes or ways of responding. So, and I did the. I'm trying to think of the woman who expressed that she had multiple personalities. I had a chance to in Maryland interview her and talk with her, and she was saying they described it as multiple personalities, but how it got started, different chemicals were responding, but she said situations, and her body developed ways uncontrollably. The difference is uncontrollably, that she wasn't able to control how her body was responding in different situations. So to be a similar situation, before she knew it, she was just responding in that situation unconsciously. And I know I'm not explaining it well. And then in another situation, she could respond that way. But she did not have control. So the key for her treatment was to help her chemically and mentally, the way she was thinking, to regain control and allow these personalities to come out when she wanted them to come out, as opposed to blocking them.
Okay.
Okay, that was my interview with her to see how did she do that. And she was saying, I did not block, they didn't treat me to block them. They treated me to reorient them and to gain control in the moment when that personality would come, not try to change it, but to go with it and bring it back and redevelop how I wanted to respond. Slow it down. Okay. And so that kind of way, yes. And then we have a doctor that comes on. He's on this show, Mending Threads, on the last Tuesday of the month. And he talks about these different things in terms of food and in terms of nutrients, vitamins, and things like that that people could use. And then he's also on Saturdays, Dr. Floyd Atkins, he's also on Saturdays um, at 10:30. He's on Zoom call. People can sign up through it for that. And then he actually interacts with you um, to help you answer certain kinds of questions about that. And he did give us the name of something, a vitamin at the store that would be helpful. It's called SAMe, SAMe, SAM-E. He thought that would be something that would help bring the body into balance many times. Okay. And also, some other things that we talked about was being relaxation. We call it mind, body, spirit medicine. And it is not only the food that you mentioned, He was saying, well, then when you have certain things, we have to keep the hyperglycemic um, status or rating balanced, and you want to lower it. And so you would then begin to look at, when you're talking about stress, post traumatic stress, anxiety, you would have to eat less starches and less sugars, those kinds of things, and only eat like fruit sugars, if you did, to a minimum, and use fruits as your dessert, and learn how to make different things like that. So we're doing those cooking shows. Matter of fact, next week will be a cooking show, and it will be looking at how that's going to be relate to our health and mental health. And then people can get the ingredients and prepare. So she's going to be posting the ingredients this week for next week, and then you'll be preparing in your kitchen and showing your meal on Saturday, on that Saturday. Hmm.
Well,
So you,
I caught one of your shows where you were in the kitchen there and you can throw down. I saw you.
yes, yes, and but no, you saw Chef Kelly and I. We were doing, but she was basically doing that. Now she can cook,
Yeah,
and you know she has a restaurant downstairs on 26,
yeah.
26. Yes, uh-huh.
Hmm.
Now she can cook, and her food really tastes. You know, you can taste all of the seasonings in the food. Uh-huh. But
Hmm.
now what she does in that restaurant, she's trying to get people who like fast foods to eat healthy foods. But
Right.
when she really cooks healthy foods, whole foods, it is awesome. Matter of fact, she had me eating for to lower my glycemic index at the time, the loss of my husband. She had me eating raw okra and tomatoes with onions and green peppers, all raw. I
Mm.
thought I would never. That ended up being one of my favorite dishes. And
What?
yes, she showed me how to cut the okra differently, how to
Hmm.
cut everything differently, how you seal it up so that the mixing that you had actually help marinates and prepares the dish. And then when you eat the dish, it almost seemed like you had stir fried it.
Mm.
And that ended
Sounds
up
pretty
being my
good.
that was my favorite dish. And I said, you need to have that in the restaurant, you see. But I wanted to
Yeah.
go back to our topic. So I wanted to say what we're talking about seems off topic, but we're really right on well being and lifestyle topics as it relates to mental health. But I have a question to ask you.
Hmm.
So women kind of go through changes and hormonal changes, be it when they are having children and gestation periods, or after children, postpartum, um, and then through midlife changes. You know, there are different things. I wanted to know how, when you talk to other men, because I've had women to ask me these questions. When you get men on the show, ask how they perceive women and what makes them perceive women in that manner, and how should women respond to men when they're feeling this way, when they're anxious and whatever. Like how men sometimes men say things about women. What do you think women need to know that men think around mental health in women?
Okay. One of the things that that I had to struggle with and still struggling with it is when women go through the menopause stage. And
Mm-hmm.
you really got to kind of do your homework and research on, I'm saying, from a man's point of view, so that you will be understanding to what's going on, because the mood swings, the hot and cold, that's just the basic things that I know about it. And it
Yes.
makes the man feel like sometimes that, wow, it's always something wrong. And, you're trying to, hey, what can I do for you? And it never seems to be the right thing to do.
Yes.
So, as men, we need to really get the pamphlet out and study and learn about the menopause stage. That's just one of them for my personal thing that I have to look at and try to be the best friend that I can be on that one. Because sometimes
Yes.
I think that I'm doing right and get clucked in the head, right?
Yes. Yes. Well, I think you're right. I think the caring part, So women who are going through menopause, remember it's very stressful. And I can remember that time. It's very stressful because it's new to you. It's new to the woman. And she really doesn't know. And no one has truly many times have prepared her for it. And when you go into the doctor's visits are so very short until you don't have a chance to really talk about all of this that's coming on. Unless you have a doctor that sits down with you, and I do Dr. Pamela Atkins. Now, the wife of that doctor that I mentioned, they sit with you for about 45 minutes or an hour and really go through all of the things that you need to know, all of the things you need to eat, all of the things, the vitamins that's going to help you. So, this is good for the man to know. But I think from talking with women that it is the man's response and expectation. Like your attitude about it is wanting you to be comfortable, recognizing that you're not going to be able to figure it out because she can't figure it out. Because what's feeling at 10 o'clock is a different feeling at 12 o'clock. And she didn't know that that feeling was going to be that way at 12 o'clock. So they tell you to prepare a stable environment so the person who's going back and forth and up and down, at least the environment is stable. The response is stable. I'm here, this is what tea helps you. My not getting too upset helps you. It's like when they're pregnant and you're ready to go get the ice cream or the pickles or whatever it is that they have, they remember that. And remembering that calms the anxiety to know that someone is there. It slows the trauma responses, the stress responses, and the trauma. And then all of the vagus nerve that responds to it becomes calmer, and you can breathe with them. You when I said breathe with them in the environment, you're creating a calm environment, a readiness environment. I got all your stuff over here. Did you say you wanted some tea? Or something like that. I'm getting ready to have this. Are you wanting some of this? Like that. So it's like I was telling my nephew, he was like, I don't know if we were taking a trip and we had a tour guide that was going to give us information, but he was a senior and it was difficult for him to get out of the truck. So I was telling him the most caring thing for someone who's going through difficulty is to pay attention to them and anticipate their needs because it's difficult for them to ask for every little thing. And even if you're wrong, you will have done the right thing. You see, to just anticipate. And so in this situation, I would say the same thing is that when the person in menopause, you pay attention to the temperature in the room because it's going to change, and especially at night. You pay attention to uh, refreshments, the water, the coolness of the water, and what the person may need at a particular time. You're never going to be 100% right because they don't know 100% the next minute what's going to happen. No one knows. But it's the anticipation of caring. That's what they remember. Okay, I remember that. I remember that. And so that helped me when I was frustrated. That helped me respond to my husband, who I was
Mm,
probably, I didn't want any demands. And he
mm,
didn't give me, he recognized earlier on to just, this is the time I don't give any demand. This is the time that I offer caring and bringing her to the moment, you see. And so that was
right.
something. And you know what I think, Mr. Johnson? I think that is also a time of redeveloping the relationship between the man and the woman differently during that period of time. It's like it's a deeper love that occurs because this person has been there. Now you the caretaker, you've been the caretaker all the time through your life, and now the man is paying attention and this anticipation of what your needs are. And as I work with women over the years, I find that this is a time that increases the possibility of more joining, of caring, of deepening the relationship. And you'll see older people in the park holding hands, and they didn't hold hands years before. It is that they
Mm-hmm.
now can look at each other, and they've been through stuff together, and they know that this person is there for them now. You see, particularly women speaking,
Mm-hmm.
listening to women. hmm So that's something I
Yeah.
did want to. hmm
Okay.
So I said I wanted us to talk about, like you gave some signs of menopause. I thought maybe we should talk about what a person needs to pay attention to. So if your partner has frustration, frequent mood changes, can't sleep, um, irritability, lack of motivation to do anything, um, thoughts of even harming themselves, or overuse of food, or underuse of food, or you see that change that's going fluctuating in the food and whatever. If they say that they start hearing voices for sure, and if the sadness lasts more than 2 weeks, um, and the person starts talking about difficulty of getting out of bed or something, or they feel hopeless or whatever, all of those difficulty in concentration, crying, those can also be chemical changes related to menopause sometimes, but those are also general signs of mental health needs, illnesses
Mm-hmm.
that we need to pay attention to. So I think so. I wanted to make sure that I covered some things that really seem to be related to women and mental health, and you have offered some things on men, what men need to know. But I wanted to see if what I've talked about, if there are any other questions or comments about women and anxiety, or women and needs, or women in relationship, and women in mental health.
Yeah.
So,
Well,
some,
so if we talk of just just back up just a minute, and I like that the question that you brought up about relationships, and that's a I mean we can go on and on about that one there, but in my opinion, when we talk about women in relationships, I think that in relationships with women, they love harder than men do. Uh,
hmm
they're more caring about the relationship. I know I would probably still be living in an apartment if I had not got with a wife because she's the one that pushed me to get the house. Because I'd probably always lived in an apartment.
right,
So
yes,
I like the idea that when you have most I'm using my mother as an example because I grew up in a single
hmm
family. So she was
hmm
also the leader, in the household, like you were saying earlier, learning how to adopt different roles. And she knew it was three of us, and she knew each one of our personalities like clockwork. She knew. She could tell when you
hmm
was lying. She knew.
hmm Yes, yes, that's right. Know everything. You got to pay attention to each person, their
Right.
eyes, just how they behave, what their needs are. And that's her anticipation, because she had to understand each child to know when you were really hurting, when you were happy, when you were not, and those kinds of things. Yes. So relationships are really important. We got a special show coming up that we're going to try. We're going to have a panel on and look at really how to build relationships. And so this is important for mental health, because women are relationship oriented. We're trained to be relationship oriented, to look out and care for other people, to anticipate their needs. So we call us ever ready. We're already ready. And the emotions are deep when we look at something, because now you're going into, when you anticipate, you have to what? Be empathic. You have to see how you feel, how the other person feel, and then you have to address how you feel. So that means your emotional self is even getting deeper. Okay. And it's not just addressed on whether you eat or not. So that's where we are. So I know that we're about timing out on our show today. And I want to really thank you for being here with us today. And I'm going to look forward to following up with you. So we're going to end our topic today. If you have any questions, please go to wrc-houston.com and sign up for our mental health madness, March Madness for mental health. We are actually raising funds right now and trying to promote services and training mental health coaches to help people in the community, help women and their families through mental health issues. So please look at that, wrc-houston.com, and it will also be posted this week. Uh, the post will come up on Thursday and it will go out to the community. And please open your hearts, your pocketbooks, and your hearts. You said people should have insurance. Many do, but the insurance may not cover because the deductible cannot be met. Thousands of dollars of deductible. So, in fact, they cannot come. They cannot receive treatment. Sometimes they don't have the copay. So, we're trying to address those people who want service and homelessness and mental health in the community. So please help us do that. wrc-houston.com. The email address is ips.health1@gmail.com. Email us your questions, and we'll look forward to. You'll see us on Twitter, and you'll see us in the community. I want you to respond, Mr. Johnson. I want to thank you for being with us today. You have opened our eyes to a lot of issues for women, and I appreciated your being candid about your particular questions. Okay, then I'm going to say that it is not the circumstances that we meet, it is the manner in which you respond that determines health, happiness, and success. Renew beliefs, rebuild faith, and reconnect families and communities. And I'll look forward to talking with you. Seeing you next week, same time, same place. Thank you now, and have a great day.